Welcome back. We're standing by to talk to Ben Stabler, who is talking about speech difficulties, the science of speech. I think I need a little bit of help this morning. But before we start, just a reminder of the conditions. The present weather, partly cloudy. The current temperature, 27.3 degrees Celsius. The relative humidity, 82 degrees. Barometric pressure, 82%, that is. Barometric pressure 12.3 millibars, and the winds are coming from the east-northeast at 15 kilometers per hour. And now we get into talking to Mr. Stabler. Ben, welcome back to Morning Barbados.
Thank you for having me back.
Thank you so much for coming. So we're talking about the types of speech and language difficulties that exist in Barbados.
Well, that exist anywhere.
Anywhere.
Actually. Very easy to define it. It is what someone is doing. Let's say a human communication problem is what someone is doing that is one of two things: either interfering with communication and or drawing attention to itself. You want to think about that one?
Yeah.
You probably should.
One of the things we touched on last week a little bit when you were here, first of all, is when should we start having a little bit of a clue that there's a problem, and you know, you said that there's some general timetables, but then each person develops differently. So let's look at that a little bit closer now. When should a parent start getting concerned?
Probably quite early if the baby has not had a newborn infant hearing screening test, which can be done the first day they're born. And that would really be able to tell whether or not the child's hearing is normal or not normal. And if it's not normal, then you figure out why, you know, if they don't pass the screening test. Basically, it's a pass or fail test. It's not a test like an audiometric test like I would give you or you, where you let me know where you barely hear each of these, what we call pure tones. No, this is a pass-fail test. So if the child passes the test, we know that this child's hearing is normal at birth. So then we try to think, well, how do we know the child's hearing is normal? Well, very early, children will give us a classic startle response because of two different things. One, either loss of balance, they'll startle, or loud noises, like a door slamming, a motorcycle going by, something dropping, and they'll startle again. That response will fade in several months. At about age 3 or 4, only 3 or 4 months though, this child's going to be sitting up, yes, and being able to hold his head up, or her head up, be able to rotate his or her head because the muscles will be strong enough to hold up her head. And if there's a sound over here, they may turn this way. If there's sound over here, they may turn this way. They'll start to localize the sound, but usually at about 4 months. Don't expect that before. Before that, they may be laying back, and mom comes in and talks, and she says something, and maybe baby looks this way, or the baby looks this way. Babies recognize mothers' and fathers' voices. So there's certain very subtle things that you can spot that, oh yeah, she heard me, he heard me. So that's and up to about 4 months, then they'll begin to localize. In terms of speech and language, all babies will babble. I spoke about that last time. That babbling starts to turn into jargon, which is more than babbling, because babies are starting to hear your voice, starting to hear your voice, and they're starting to hear inflections in the voice. Stop that. Hello, how are you? And the baby will start to imitate those sorts of things, not with words, but with inflections in the voice. So the babbling starts to change in funny ways. No words pop out yet. And around plus or minus 10, 12, 14 months, maybe a word will pop out. So words will begin around a year, plus or minus. That's what you look for. Now, if it's not happening, do not panic, because every child has his or her timetable. And it can be influenced simply by their maturation level and how quickly they mature, or or things around them. You know, do they really have to talk? Do they have to, if they're, and as they get older, 1, 2, 3, as I said before, if they are happy with pointing out things or crying and getting attention, and certain cries denote different things: cry for pain, cry for hunger, a cry for I want something, and mothers and fathers are scrambling to get what they want. Well, cries work, and if it works, don't fix it.
But when should you start panicking? At what age? And then what should be the signs that make you panic?
Yeah.
Well,
well, if there's a panic period.
Well, okay, let's say roughly speaking, remember I said at about age 3 we expect about 300 or 400 words. Those are words. So previous to that, 3 years old, are 2 plus, is that child producing words, any words? And at 2, are they producing short phrases? Stop that. Get down. Mommy, please for
Juice.
Biscuits or Big. Sorry about the baby talk thing I said last week. Don't misunderstand that. Right. No, I don't teach baby talk, but you accept some baby talk from babies, and then those become real words later on. But again, Big is better than That's a move forward. Age 3, that's a watershed mark. So you can really understand if there's no speech at 3, no language. Now language can be two words. Yeah. Get down, stop that. That's language. That's using a couple words. So if there are no short phrases or a lot of vocabulary that is understandable not only to the parents, but to maybe a neighbor or a friend who stops by and hears the child talking and say, what is she saying? No, that the neighbor can understand what the child's saying. Then you start to not panic, but you start to scratch your head and say, well, how do we get some words out of this child? Or you come to someone like me or one of my associates and say, well, am I right to be concerned about what my child is doing now? And then they'll give you some answers.
So apart from problems with hearing, and maybe you did the test and your child can hear properly, but there's still not that vocabulary at 3 or 400 words or thereabout, short phrases. What could be some of the other issues that could be affecting the language?
Well, remember, everything we use to speak with are articulators. Now, articulators are our lips, our tongue, our jaw. We have to make sure that this child is using them. And so the first thing I would ask a parent, well, is the child eating what you're eating now at 3? Or is he still drinking out of a bottle, a sippy cup? Does he have to use his articulators to perform their primary task? Now, their primary task is chewing and swallowing, even the tongue. You position your tongue to swallow. If they're drooling, if they're not eating, if they're simply, not swallowing, well, how are they going to be able to do a very fine motor coordination kind of thing like speaking if they're not even swallowing or if they're drooling? Right? So you do it's pretty much a global evaluation in terms of what's going on with the child. And of course the hearing as well. It's a little easier to test a 3-year-old than a 3-month-old in terms of hearing. Not that easy, but easier.
So what's the next step if my 3-year-old, for instance, he or she doesn't have the words they need to have, they're not articulating at that point? What's the next step? What would you recommend?
Well, you say hearing and not articulating. That is not necessarily synonymous. You can have most of the children who have, let's say, delays in their articulation, or called phonology, however you want to state it, they have normal hearing. So what's the problem? Well, remember I said there's a timetable for every consonant sound. You omit the sound and you substitute an easier sound, and then you finally produce a sound. Like, remember, at, there's an at, mommy, nice little kitty at. It's a tat, because the tongue tip is easier to raise in the back of the tongue, but it phonetically sounds similar. And then finally cat. Oop, toop, thoop, soup. So lisps are pretty common and acceptable at a certain age. It's okay to say thoop when you're 3, but not when you're 13.
You introduced stammering last time, and
Sure.
we were running out of time when you were
Yeah,
going to explore it, and you said it's something that could be reversed or unlearned.
Well, I say unlearned. That, like I say, there are many theories about it. My studying under my professors and also people I've worked with in the field who are quite well known, and I think every solution has to be tailor-made. And especially the adult who comes in who still stutters is not like the 2.5-year-old who's coming in and stuttering and struggling. It's very easy to work with the 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old when they start to struggle. That's important. Mom, can I have some chips?
How was
It's not struggling.
How was that learned? Because you said unlearned. So how was stammering learned if there's no one else in the house?
Let's take it a step back. How is mommy can I have some chips? Now, is that stammering? I promised I wouldn't ask questions to you for questions, but I got to ask that question. Okay. Is that stammering? Is that stammering or stuttering, which are synonymous?
Yeah.
So was that example I gave you stuttering?
Well, to the layperson, it does sound like the child is stuttering.
So we expect that child to begin to learn to say, "Mommy, may I have some chips, please?" Perfectly.
We have great expectations of our children.
Well, are we expecting that? I mean, so if they don't say, "Mommy, may I have some chips, please?" If they say, "Mommy, may I have some chips, please?" we panic, right? Do we panic? No child is going to go from no speech to fluent speech, and that's the whole word, fluent speech. I'm sorry, you may be reading from a teleprompter, and you're very fluent, but are you that fluent at home too? I ask another question. Are you that fluent at home? Is everybody, and fluent is perfect speech. No hesitations, no repetitions of parts of words or whole words. Now, who does that?
But we're running out of time. But you told me earlier that you've been practicing in Barbados for 40 odd years. Yeah.